What is that supposed to be? No way. That is the new English professor? They hired somebody who looks like she should be greeting shoppers at the front door. 5 junior football players leaned against the hallway wall as if the building belonged to them. Their laughter bounced off the concrete. Colton Briggs glanced at the woman walking toward them and made another cruel remark about what a black woman could possibly know about teaching. Landon Pike lifted his phone and pointed the camera at her face. Pierce Dalton added a racist joke under his breath, then laughed with the others. The woman did not flinch. She tightened her hand around the strap of her worn satchel and kept walking. "Good morning, gentlemen." Grayson Vale stepped into her path. He was the starting quarterback, the son of one of the university's most powerful donors, and a young man who had spent most of his life learning that rules usually bent before they reached him. "Welcome to Crest Haven, sweetheart," he said. "Let's see how long it takes before you decide this place is too much for you." She gave him the smallest smile, walked around him and continued down the hallway. Grayson watched her go, still grinning. I had no idea how much that grin was going to cost him. Nia Whitaker had spent years learning how to wake up before she needed an alarm. 12 years in the United States Marine Corps had turned discipline into instinct. Her eyes opened, her feet touched the hardwood floor. She took one slow breath, and she got up. Her apartment was small, a one-bedroom rental near the edge of town. There were bare walls, a second-hand couch, and a kitchen that usually carried the faint smell of yesterday's coffee. Nothing about the place was expensive, but everything had a place. Towels were folded neatly. Shoes lined the wall by the door. The bed was made so tightly that an old Marine would have approved without saying a word. Some habits do not disappear just because the uniform does. On the mantel, above the television, sat a folded American flag inside a triangular case. Beside it was an empty patch of wood with a faint ring of dust, the place where a photograph had once stood. The photograph was hidden in a drawer now, face down beneath old bills and a bag of rubber bands. It showed a younger Nia in marine dress blues. Her jaw was set, her shoulders square, 3 chevrons and crossed rifles on her sleeve. She did not display it anymore. That had been another life, or at least that was what she had been telling herself. In the kitchen, her 18-year-old daughter, Camille, sat at the small table, eating cereal. She was a freshman at the same university where Nia had just been hired. Her eyes were bright, but her fingers kept drifting toward the phone she had placed face down beside the bowl. "You okay?" Nia asked as she poured coffee into a plain white mug. Camille shrugged. "What if they don't like me?" Nia set the mug down and looked at her daughter. Really looked at her. "You walk in there, like you belong," she said. "Because you do." Camille's smile was small, but it was real. They drove to campus in Nia's old sedan with the windows down. The air was heavy with southern humidity, sweetened by honeysuckle growing wild along the roadside fences. A gospel station played quietly through the speakers. The same station Nia almost never changed. Crest Haven State University, spread across 60 acres of red clay and green lawn. It was a mid-sized public school in a small, mostly white southern town, with enrollment just under 6,000 students. It was not an elite private university, and it did not pretend to be. But it was fiercely proud of one thing: football. You could feel it the moment you passed through the front gate. A 40-foot banner welcomed visitors to the home of the Crest Haven Lions, back-to-back conference champions. The stadium rose behind the main quad, like a cathedral. It was bigger than the library and, judging by appearances, probably better funded. Trophy cases filled the athletics hallway. Photographs of smiling players in pads covered the walls. Boosters' names were engraved on brass plaques. A giant roaring lion watched over the student union. The message was everywhere. Football was king. The players were treated like royalty. People rarely challenged them. When they crossed a line, people often looked away. In the faculty lounge, another professor named Lenora Hayes found Nia pouring coffee. Lenora was 58 and the only other black faculty member in the humanities department. She had taught there for 11 years, long enough to understand where the invisible lines were drawn. Without asking, she poured Nia another cup and sat across from her. "I'm going to tell you something nobody else will," Lenora said, lowering her voice. "The football boys run this building, especially the juniors. They test every new professor. And when a professor looks like us, they push harder." Nia listened without interrupting. "The administration won't protect you the way you think it will," Lenora continued. "Grayson Vale's father sits on the board of trustees. He paid for most of the athletics wing. You file a complaint, and there is a good chance it disappears before anybody has to answer for it." "What do you suggest?" Nia asked. Lenora took a long drink of coffee. "Keep your head down. Teach your classes. Don't make waves." Nia looked into her cup, then toward the window, where the football stadium cast a long shadow across the quad. "Thank you, Lenora. I appreciate the honesty." She never said she would take the advice, Lenora noticed. Across campus, head coach Everett Shaw was already buried in scouting reports and playbooks. He was 61, with a silver crew cut and a voice rough enough to carry across a full stadium without a microphone. On his desk, beside a stack of game film notes, sat a framed photograph of a young man in marine dress blues standing at attention on graduation day. Beneath it was a handwritten note. "Thanks for believing in me, Dad. Dorian." Dorian Shaw was Coach Shaw's only son. He was serving overseas with his battalion. Nobody at Crest Haven connected that photograph to the new English professor in the humanities building. Not yet. Nia's first class was an introductory English composition course on the second floor. The room held 26 students. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Plastic chairs were bolted to narrow desks. The air smelled faintly of dry erase markers and overworked air conditioning. Nia arrived early. Her laptop was open. The syllabus was printed. Every student had a copy waiting. Her pens were arranged parallel to the edge of the desk. Marine habits again. Everything squared away before the first student settled into a chair. Students trickled in. Some smiled. Some avoided eye contact. A few whispered while glancing at her, then returned to their phones. Then the back row filled. Grayson Vale entered first, his Letterman jacket hanging from one shoulder and his baseball cap turned backward. He dropped into a seat, stretched his legs into the aisle, and pulled out his phone without looking at Nia. Colton Briggs sat beside him. Pierce Dalton came next. Landon Pike already had his camera app open. Wesley Carter entered last, more quietly than the others, his eyes lowered toward the floor. 5 players across the back row. A wall of confidence that had never been forced to examine itself. When class began, Nia stood at the front. "Good morning. My name is Miss Whitaker. I'll be teaching this course this semester." Her voice was warm, but firm. She explained what she expected. Show up. Participate. Meet deadlines. Respect the room. No special treatment. "This class runs on mutual respect," she said. "You give it and you get it." A voice came from the back row. "What exactly qualifies you to teach us?" Grayson leaned back with his arms crossed. He did not sound curious. He sounded entertained. The room went still. 21 students looked toward Nia. 5 watched Grayson. Nia did not hesitate. 12 years of leadership experience and a state teaching credential. "Do you have another question about my qualifications, Mr. Vale?" A few students shifted in their seats. Someone near the front quietly exhaled. Grayson's smirk flickered for half a second. He was not used to being addressed that way. He was not used to someone meeting his eyes without either admiration or fear. He recovered quickly. "Leadership experience," he repeated, mocking the phrase. "Sure thing, ma'am." A few people laughed. Not everyone, but enough for the room to feel smaller. Nia let the silence settle, then picked up the stack of syllabi and began passing them out, row by row, as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Everyone in that room knew it. Over the next 2 weeks, the campaign started. It was not loud. It was not physical. It was deliberate. the kind of harassment designed to leave no visible bruise while wearing a person down one small cut at a time. Colton began by talking over her in every class. He did not shout, he simply kept up a low conversation with Grayson, just loud enough to break the flow of the lecture and just quiet enough to pretend he had done nothing. Whenever Nia asked him to stop, he lifted both hands and smiled. "My bad, Professor. Won't happen again." It always happened again. Landon used his phone. He recorded her through entire classes, propping the device against his water bottle and aiming the camera toward the front. He did not post the footage, at least not yet. He was collecting it, waiting for a moment when Nia might sound angry, tired, or frustrated enough to be edited into something else. One day after class, Nia saw a group chat notification flash across his screen as he passed her desk. The chat was called Operation Diversity Hire. She gave no reaction. She simply opened a small notebook later and documented what she had seen. Pierce preferred intimidation without contact. He sometimes arrived before class and sat in Nia's chair. When she entered, he would rise slowly with a wide smile. "Sorry, Professor. Thought this was the lounge." Other times he stood in a doorway, filling the frame with his shoulders until she had to angle her body to get past him. He never touched her. He did not need to. The message was meant to be understood without evidence. Grayson's move was the boldest. For his first essay assignment, he turned in a page with no essay at all. Across the center, in thick black marker, he had written that the class was not worth his time, and neither was she. Nia held the paper for a moment, then placed it inside a manila folder. She marked what had been submitted and put the folder in her desk. She was building a record. That was how she had been trained to respond when emotion could cloud judgment. Observe, document, stay precise, stay patient, let facts carry their own weight. After 10 days, the folder contained 14 documented incidents. Nia carried it to the office of the Humanities Department chair, Dr. Celeste Hawthorne. Celeste was 53, wore wire-rimmed glasses, and had a polished smile that never quite reached her eyes. Her office smelled of lavender air freshener and old paper. Nia placed the folder on the desk. "I'm formally reporting a pattern of targeted harassment by 5 students in my composition course. The incidents are documented here." Celeste opened the folder, scanned the first page, and closed it again. "Miss Whitaker, I understand why this is frustrating," she said, "but these are student athletes in the middle of an important season. Grayson's father is deeply involved with the university. He's been extremely generous." She paused as if selecting each word for maximum safety. "My recommendation is that you try to build rapport. Find some common ground." "Common ground," Nia repeated. "Sometimes flexibility is the best approach." Nia looked at Celeste. Then she looked at the folder. Behind Celeste's desk hung a framed photograph from a university fundraising gala. Celeste stood in the picture beside Harrison Vale, Grayson's father. Both were smiling broadly. "Thank you for your time, Dr. Hawthorne." Nia picked up the folder and walked out. Nothing changed. In fact, once the players realized that she had reported them and no visible consequence followed, they became more confident. Grayson got louder. Colton got bolder. Landon's phone kept recording. Nia kept teaching. She kept grading. And she kept documenting. Grayson's second essay contained actual writing, but very little effort. It was roughly 400 words, loosely organized, with no clear thesis and 2 paragraphs copied almost word for word from Wikipedia. Nia graded it according to the same rubric she used for everyone else, D-. The following afternoon, Grayson was waiting outside her office. He leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, his jaw tight. The hallway was nearly empty and late daylight stretched long shadows across the floor. "You need to change that grade," he said. No greeting, no attempt at politeness. Nia unlocked her office door. "I graded the work you submitted according to the rubric. If you want a better grade, write a better essay." Grayson moved closer. He did not touch her. He simply entered her space until the air between them felt deliberately narrow. "You don't know who you're messing with." Nia turned and looked directly at him. He stood several inches taller than she did. She did not step back. And you don't know who you're talking to. The confidence in his face shifted for a moment. It was brief, but Nia saw it. Doubt. Then he forced his smile back into place. We'll see, Professor. We'll see. He walked away with his hands in his pockets, whistling as though the conversation had meant nothing. At the far end of the hallway stood Wesley Carter. He had seen the exchange. He said nothing, but his face had lost the easy expression he wore around his teammates. That evening, Grayson called his father. By the next day, Dr. Hawthorne asked Nia to come back to her office. Mr. Vale has expressed concern about your grading standards, she said, folding her hands on the desk. He believes his son may be getting singled out. Perhaps you could reconsider the grade. No, Nia said. The words sat in the room with nowhere to hide. Celeste blinked. Miss Whitaker, I'm trying to keep the peace. Nia stood and lifted her bag from the chair. With all due respect, Dr. Hawthorne, peace built on silence isn't peace. It's permission. She walked out, and the door closed quietly behind her. Weeks passed. Nia continued teaching, grading, and filing each incident into the same manila folder. She did not argue in hallways. She did not trade insults. She did not give anyone the reaction they seemed determined to capture. But Grayson Vale was not finished. People who have spent years being protected from consequences sometimes mistake resistance for a challenge to their identity. When Nia refused to bend, the group escalated. This time, they went after Camille. It began in the dining hall. Camille was sitting alone at a corner table with a turkey sandwich and her phone. She had spent her first few weeks trying to find her place on campus. She had made a few friends, joined a study group, and was beginning to believe she might finally feel at home there. Grayson and Colton passed her table. Grayson did not stop. He barely even looked at her. He simply made a loud comment suggesting that the school's standards were falling because families like hers were being let in. Colton laughed. A few students looked up. Nobody challenged them. Camille's hand stopped above her plate. She stared down until the two players were gone. Then, an anonymous social media account appeared. It had no profile picture, no biography, and no real audience of its own. It existed for one purpose: to target Camille. The first posts were cruel memes implying that she had been admitted only because of affirmative action. Another post used a photograph someone had taken of her in the library without permission. She was caught mid-yawn, unaware of the camera. The caption suggested she did not belong at the university. Another post crossed an even uglier line, pairing her full name with a racist image. There was no ambiguity left. It was not teasing. It was not harmless humor. It was targeted humiliation. Screenshots spread through student group chats quickly. The effect on Camille was immediate. Her roommate stopped speaking to her. There was no argument, no explanation. She would enter the room, put on headphones, and turn toward the wall as if Camille were not there. Her study group quietly removed her from its group chat. Camille discovered it only when she tried to ask a question and saw a notification saying she was no longer a member. At lunch, open seats suddenly became saved seats. Conversation stopped when she approached. Tables with plenty of room somehow had none for her. Camille began eating alone every day. She sat at the same corner table with earbuds in, looking down at her food and pretending she could not feel people watching. She lasted 9 days before telling her mother. They sat together in the apartment, under the faint buzz of the kitchen light. Camille picked at the skin beside one fingernail and spoke in a small, flat voice, the voice of someone trying not to let tears change the words. They made an account about me, Mom. Memes. Everyone has seen them. People don't talk to me anymore. Some of them won't even look at me. Nia sat very still. She held a coffee mug, but she did not drink. The surface moved slightly because her hand had begun to shake. Not from fear. From anger she had spent years learning to control. For a brief moment, something crossed Nia's face that belonged to an older version of her, the staff sergeant, who could silence a row of recruits with one look. Then it disappeared. Control returned. I'll handle this, she said softly. Nia filed a formal bullying complaint with the Dean of Students' office. She included screenshots, the anonymous account's handle, details of what Camille had experienced, and a clear sequence of events. Several days later, a form email arrived. "Thank you for your report. The matter has been forwarded to the appropriate office for review. No further action is required from you at this time." There was no phone call, no meeting, no visible investigation. Once again, the system answered with silence. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. The humanities building was nearly empty. Footsteps faded down stairwells. Office doors clicked shut. The overhead lights had shifted to their dimmer evening setting, casting long yellow shadows across the hallway. Nia sat in her office grading midterm essays. Her door was open. A desk lamp warmed the papers in front of her, and a red pen moved steadily across the page. The only sounds were the scratch of the pen and the low hum of the building's old ventilation system. Then she heard footsteps, several sets, heavy, unhurried, the stride of people who believed they had no reason to be cautious. Nia did not look up immediately. Grayson appeared first in the doorway. He tapped twice against the already open door in a performance of politeness. "Hey, Professor, got a minute?" Behind him came Colton, Landon, Pierce, and Wesley. All five entered. Colton closed the door. The latch clicked. Nia finally looked up. Grayson pulled a chair from the corner and dragged it across the floor until it sat in the center of the room. He lowered himself into it, legs apart, elbows resting on his knees, looking more like a man running a meeting than a student visiting a professor. "We need to have a real conversation about your attitude, Miss Whitaker." Landon already had his phone out. The camera faced Nia. A small red light showed that he was recording. Pierce stood near the window with his arms folded, blocking much of the remaining natural light. Colton leaned against the closed door. He was not technically guarding it, but he made no effort to move away. Wesley stood in the back corner with his arms at his sides and his eyes on the floor. Grayson began slowly. "People like you come and go around here, Miss Whitaker. Every few semesters they bring somebody new in. Some diversity program, some equity initiative, whatever human resources wants to call it. And eventually that person leaves. The smart ones figure it out early and save themselves the embarrassment." He leaned forward. "You've barely been here, and complaints are already piling up. Students are unhappy. Parents are calling. Your own department chair has questions about your performance." Colton added from the door that her online professor rating was barely above 1 out of 5. Grayson smiled. "See, this isn't personal. This is how this place works, and you don't fit here." Pierce stepped closer and placed both palms on Nia's desk. He leaned forward until his face was far too close to hers. "Your daughter doesn't fit here either," he said quietly. "Just so we're clear." The room seemed to lose all warmth. Nia had not moved. Her hands remained folded. Her red pen lay beside the stack of essays. Her breathing stayed slow and even. It was the breathing of someone who had trained herself to remain calm in rooms far more dangerous than this one. She looked at Pierce, then Grayson, then each of the others in turn. "Are you finished?" she asked. Her voice was low, even, almost quiet. Grayson laughed, but the laugh sounded thinner than before. "Yeah, we're finished. The question is whether you are. This is your chance to walk away clean, Professor. Take the hint. Save your dignity." Nia unfolded her hands and stood. Slowly, deliberately. "I'm going to say this once. You have 10 seconds to leave my office." Grayson grinned. "Or what? You'll give us an F?" Nia glanced at Landon's phone, then returned her eyes to Grayson. "No, I'm going to let you keep recording, because every second of this is helping document what you've been doing." The grin on Grayson's face cracked just enough to show that the sentence had landed. What none of them knew was that Nia's own phone had been recording since the first knock on the door. It sat inside her open desk drawer, with the voice memo running silently, capturing every word. Outside in the hallway, Lenora Hayes had stopped walking the moment she heard Nia's door close. She listened for a few seconds, Then she turned and moved quickly toward the athletics building. Lenora did not bother knocking when she reached Coach Everett Shaw's office. She opened the door. Coach Shaw looked up from his desk. Reading glasses rested halfway down his nose, and a game replay was paused on his laptop. The moment he saw Lenora's expression, he removed the glasses. "What's wrong?" "Your players," she said, trying to catch her breath. "All 5 of them. They're in Nia Whitaker's office right now. Door closed. I heard what they were saying, Everett. It's bad." Coach Shaw was standing before she finished. He did not grab his jacket. He did not stop for his phone. He simply moved. Fast. Lenora had to hurry to keep pace. Their footsteps echoed through the nearly empty humanities building. They climbed to the 2nd floor and moved down the hall toward Nia's office. The door was still closed. Coach Shaw could hear Grayson's voice inside. Calm, smug, unhurried. The voice of somebody who believed nothing could touch him. Coach Shaw grabbed the handle and pushed the door open hard enough that it struck the wall behind it. Every head turned. 5 football players stood around one woman in a small office. Coach Shaw's expression changed from concern to fury. "What is going on in here?" His voice filled the room. The same voice that had commanded football fields for decades and could make a 240-pound lineman straighten without thinking. Grayson jumped to his feet. The chair scraped backward. Colton moved away from the door. Pierce pulled his hands from the desk so quickly that he knocked over a cup of pens. Landon lowered his phone, slowly, not before Coach Shaw saw it. "We were just talking, Coach," Grayson said. "Just having a conversation with our professor." "A conversation?" Coach Shaw repeated. He looked at Colton near the door. Pierce beside the desk. Landon's phone. And Wesley frozen in the corner. Then he looked at Nia and stopped. The anger on his face shifted into something else. His eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but with recognition struggling to reach the surface. He stared at her. Nia met his gaze with the same stillness she had shown all afternoon. "Wait," Coach Shaw said. His voice dropped. "Whitaker? Nia Whitaker?" She said nothing. He stared harder. "Staff Sergeant Whitaker." His hand rose toward his mouth. "You're Dorian's drill instructor." The room went silent. Grayson looked at Colton. Colton looked at Pierce. Wesley finally raised his head. Coach Shaw pulled out his phone, with hands that had begun to tremble. He searched through his photographs, found the one he wanted, and turned the screen toward the players. Bright southern sun. Marine Corps graduation. His son, Dorian, in dress blues, standing at attention, with pride, written across his face. Beside him stood Nia Whitaker in her own dress blues, 3 chevrons and crossed rifles on her sleeve. Same eyes, same calm, same woman they had spent weeks trying to humiliate. Grayson's face drained of color. For once, he had nothing to say. Colton stepped back until his shoulders touched the wall. Pierce looked from the photograph to Nia and back again as though his mind were refusing to accept what he could plainly see. Wesley looked sick. Coach Shaw lowered the phone. When he spoke, his voice shook, but not from anger now. "This woman made my son into a man. Dorian was lost before he enlisted. Angry, directionless, headed nowhere good. She challenged him, rebuilt his discipline, and helped him become a United States Marine." He swallowed. "And the 5 of you cornered her in an empty office and tried to run her out of this school." Nobody answered. Nia reached into her desk drawer and lifted her phone. The recording was still running. It had captured more than half an hour of the conversation. "I want to make something clear," she said. "I did not come here to intimidate anyone. I came here to teach. But I have dealt with situations more dangerous than 5 students in an office, and I have documented every incident since my first day at this university." She looked directly at Grayson. "Your father sits on the board of trustees. That means you should understand better than anyone what accountability looks like." Grayson's hands had begun to shake. Nia pointed toward the door. "Now get out of my office." They left in single file. No jokes, no swagger. No one looked back. Coach Shaw remained in the doorway, one hand resting against the frame. His eyes were wet. "I'm sorry." he said quietly. "I didn't know you were here." "If I had known." "You're here now," Nia said. "That's what matters." Nia did not wait for the situation to cool down before acting. She went home, sat at the kitchen table, opened her laptop, and began organizing everything she had collected. Camille was asleep in the next room. The apartment was quiet except for the steady clicking of Nia's keyboard. She attached the full voice recording from the office. She scanned the manila folder containing weeks of incident reports. She added screenshots from the anonymous account that had targeted Camille. She formally requested the hallway security footage, showing all 5 players entering her office and the door closing behind them. Then she wrote one email to the president of Cresthaven State University, Dr. Conrad Ellis. She copied the University Compliance Office and the Office of Student Conduct. She did not copy Dr. Celeste Hawthorne. The subject was simple: formal report, documented pattern of racial harassment and intimidation, evidence attached. Then she sent it. The response was completely different from the form letter Camille's complaint had received. The university president's office launched a formal investigation. Compliance officers arrived at the humanities building. Security preserved the hallway footage. The video was clear. All 5 players entered Nia's office together. Colton closed the door behind them. By the end of the initial review, all 5 students were suspended on an interim basis while the investigation continued. No classes, no practice, no games. The news hit the athletics department hard. Cresthaven was close to a conference championship. Its starting quarterback, one of its best receivers, and several key defenders had all been removed from competition at once. Boosters began calling. Sports radio picked up rumors. People who had ignored the behavior for years suddenly cared because the consequences were visible on a scoreboard. Then Harrison Vale arrived. He drove onto campus in a black Mercedes and walked into President Ellis's office without an appointment. He did not sit. "Do you understand what you're doing?" he demanded. "I've donated more money to this university than most of your faculty will earn in a lifetime. You're willing to throw away the season because one new professor says her feelings were hurt?" President Ellis let him finish. Then he turned his laptop around and pressed play. Grayson's voice filled the office. "People like you come and go around here. You don't fit. Your daughter doesn't fit either." President Ellis stopped the recording and looked at Harrison over the top of his glasses. "Your son is recorded intimidating a faculty member in a closed office while making racially motivated statements about her and her daughter. I would recommend that you focus on helping him take responsibility rather than asking this university to make the evidence disappear." Harrison opened his mouth, then closed it. His fingers tightened around the back of a chair until his knuckles went pale. He left without another word. Apology letters began arriving soon afterward. Grayson's came first. It was typed, carefully formatted, and sounded as though every sentence had passed through an attorney. He wrote that he regretted if his words had been perceived as offensive. He said he valued diversity and inclusion. He referred to what happened as a misunderstanding and expressed hope that everyone could move forward. Nia read it once, then she placed it on the corner of her desk. She did not respond. Wesley Carter came in alone. No lawyer, no prepared statement, no teammates standing behind him. He knocked softly on Nia's open door. "Miss Whitaker, can I talk to you?" Nia nodded. Wesley stepped into the same office where he had stood silent while his teammates tried to intimidate her. This time his eyes were red and his voice broke before he finished the first sentence. "I knew it was wrong," he said. "Every second of it I knew. And I just stood there. I didn't tell them to stop. I didn't leave. I didn't get help. I let it happen because I was scared of what they'd think of me if I went against them." He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "I'm sorry, I really am." Nia looked at him for a long moment. The silence between them was not punishment. It was space. The kind of space where a person has to sit with the truth of what he has done. Finally, Nia spoke. "Coming here took courage, Wesley. Real courage. Don't waste it." He nodded. He did not ask her to forgive him. He did not ask her to protect him from the consequences. He simply turned and left. Coach Shaw called the entire football team together in the locker room. 52 players sat on metal benches with their helmets between their feet. The room smelled like sweat, rubber, and old athletic tape. No one knew exactly what Coach Shaw was going to say, but every player knew why they had been called in. Coach Shaw stood at the front with his arms at his sides. "We're forfeiting the next game," he said. The room erupted. Players protested. Shoes scraped against concrete. Voices rose at once. Coach Shaw raised one hand. Silence returned. "I don't coach bullies," he said. "If wearing this jersey means you think talent excuses cruelty, then take it off. Turn in your pads and walk out that door. I would rather lose every game left on the schedule than win one with men who cannot tell the difference between strength and intimidation." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The investigation did not stop with the 5 suspensions. Once compliance officers began opening old files, the problem grew larger than anyone had admitted. They pulled 3 years of student conduct records and discovered that Grayson Vale and several members of his circle had been reported before. More than once. By more than one person. A former adjunct professor named Dr. Laurel Benson had resigned during the previous academic year. She was 29 when she left. Investigators located a 14-page statement she had submitted before resigning. In it, Laurel described months of classroom disruption, mockery, and intimidation. She had filed 3 formal complaints. Each time, she had been advised to build rapport, find common ground, and avoid escalating the situation. Then one day, she arrived at her office and found the word "quit" scratched into her desk with a key. That was the moment she decided she could not take another day. She packed her office and left. No meaningful investigation followed. Her contract quietly ended. There was no serious exit interview and no attempt to understand why a young professor had walked away in the middle of an academic term. 2 former students came forward next. Both were black. Both had attended Cresthaven during Grayson's earlier years on campus. They described being mocked in hallways, excluded from study groups, and targeted with racist private messages that were screenshotted and passed around among other students. Neither had filed a formal report. One explained why in a sentence that stayed with investigators. Who were we supposed to tell? The people protecting them. The anonymous account targeting. Camille was also traced. University information technology staff reviewed the available records and connected the account to Colton Briggs's dorm room laptop. The device still contained the original images in a folder labeled with Camille's initials, organized like a project. That discovery removed any claim that the posts had been random or spontaneous. They had been planned. But the most damaging evidence came from inside the administration. Investigators reviewed Dr. Celeste Hawthorne's email records. They found 6 formal complaints spanning 3 years, all involving Grayson or members of his group. Every complaint had been received. Every complaint had been read. None had resulted in a proper disciplinary referral. Not one. Then, investigators found emails Celeste had sent to Harrison Vale. In several messages, she informed him about complaints before those complaints had been formally processed. In one, she assured him that she had handled the matter and suggested discussing it further at a fundraising gala. This was no longer a story about one administrator being passive or overwhelmed. The evidence suggested she had actively protected a donor's son from consequences. A local reporter named Tessa Monroe received a tip from a campus employee. She was 26 and worked for the small local newspaper. Her article focused on the pattern of complaints, the influence of donors, and the university's repeated failure to act. The story spread beyond the town. Regional outlets picked it up. Then, national news organizations followed. The details were difficult to ignore. A decorated Marine veteran had become a teacher, faced repeated racial harassment from football players, documented it carefully, and discovered that administrators had been warned before but had failed to intervene. Dorian Shaw gave an interview from his military base. He sat in uniform with his hands folded and spoke slowly. "Staff Sergeant Whitaker is one of the reasons I'm the man I am today," he said. "When I arrived for training, I was angry and directionless. I didn't believe anybody expected much from me. She did. She pushed me harder than I thought I could handle, but she also made me believe discipline could give my life direction. I cannot imagine anyone treating her the way those students did. The interview spread widely online. Veterans groups publicly supported Nia. Teachers' organizations called for stronger protections. Civil rights advocates asked the university to examine not only what the students had done, but how the institution had allowed the behavior to continue. The consequences followed. After the investigations and disciplinary hearings were completed, Grayson Vale was expelled from Cresthaven State University. He also faced criminal charges connected to intimidation and bias-motivated harassment. The court ordered community service, supervised probation, and counseling. His football scholarship opportunities disappeared. Colton Briggs was expelled as well. He faced separate consequences for the online harassment campaign against Camille. The digital evidence on his laptop left little room for denial. Landon Pike was expelled. The recordings he had made because he thought they would embarrass Nia became evidence of his own conduct. Pierce Dalton was expelled and faced additional disciplinary and legal consequences. His family publicly described the situation as a misunderstanding, but the documented record told a different story. Wesley Carter received a different outcome. He was suspended for the remainder of the semester, but he was not expelled. His voluntary cooperation, his willingness to testify truthfully, and his genuine remorse were taken into account. He was required to complete a restorative justice program and write a public letter of accountability. He wrote it by hand. 6 pages. In that letter, he did not blame pressure, alcohol, stress, teammates, coaches, or anybody else. He admitted that he had known the behavior was wrong and had chosen silence anyway. Dr. Celeste Hawthorne was terminated for serious failures in handling the complaints and for breaching her responsibilities to students and faculty. Her professional standing was placed under formal review. She left campus without speaking publicly. Harrison Vale was removed from the Board of Trustees after an ethics investigation concluded that he had used his influence to pressure administrators regarding complaints involving his son. Dr. Laurel Benson, the former adjunct professor, filed a civil lawsuit against Harrison and the university, alleging that she had effectively been forced out after the institution failed to protect her. The matter was later settled outside court for an undisclosed amount. Cresthaven announced a series of reforms. Anti-discrimination training became mandatory for staff and students. An independent oversight committee was created to review harassment complaints. No single administrator would have the power to quietly close a serious complaint without review. The university also created an anonymous reporting hotline operated by an outside organization. Then, the university asked Nia Whitaker to help design the new training curriculum. She said yes, not because she wanted her name on it, because she wanted the next person to have a door that opened before the situation reached a breaking point. Several weeks later, Dorian Shaw came home. He drove to Cresthaven State in his service uniform. Every crease pressed sharp, shoes polished, posture carrying the quiet precision of a Marine who had not forgotten where he learned it. He crossed the quad and found Nia's office. The door was open. Nia sat at the same desk with the same red pen, grading papers beneath the same warm desk lamp. She looked up. Dorian stepped into the center of the room, brought his heels together, straightened his shoulders, and saluted her. Nia stood. For a moment, she did not look like a professor standing in a modest college office. She looked like the woman in the photograph hidden in her apartment drawer. Her back straightened. Her chin lifted. 12 years of muscle memory moved through her arm as she returned the salute, crisp and precise. They held it for a few seconds. Then Dorian smiled. It was a wide, unguarded smile, the kind that releases years of gratitude in one expression. Coach Shaw stood in the doorway behind him. He said nothing. I did not need to. A student passing the office captured the moment on her phone. The photograph showed a Marine in dress blues saluting his former drill instructor inside a college office. It spread across social media and was shared more than 200,000 times. Nia Whitaker stayed at Cresthaven State. Same office, same desk, same red pen. But the room felt different. The door remained open, and students began walking through it for reasons that had nothing to do with conflict. Some came to ask about grades. Some needed advice. Some were athletes. Some were freshmen. Some were upperclassmen who had never taken one of her classes. They came because they had heard what happened, but many stayed because Nia listened without making them feel small. She became the faculty advisor for the university's new Student Equity Council. She helped build the anti-discrimination curriculum that incoming students completed during orientation. She never asked for a ceremony. She never asked for a plaque. What she received mattered more to her. Respect. Not the kind demanded by a title, a uniform, a donation, or a winning record. The kind earned by how a person behaves when pressure reveals who they really are. Camille finished her freshman year with a 3.6 grade point average. She joined the debate team and eventually earned a varsity position. She was also selected as the student representative on the university's new oversight committee, becoming its youngest member by 4 years. She still ate lunch in the dining hall. The difference was that she no longer searched for a table where people might allow her to sit. She chose her own table, and there was room. Wesley Carter eventually graduated quietly. He did not receive a heroic redemption story, and he did not ask for one. He enrolled in a community college, closer to home, and began volunteering on weekends with a mentorship program for young people at risk of falling behind. Before leaving Cresthaven, the campus newspaper asked him what he had learned. "I thought for a long time before answering. I learned that silence is a choice," he said, "and it isn't always neutral." Grayson Vale completed the terms ordered by the court, including 200 hours of community service, supervised probation, regular check-ins, and mandatory counseling. His football career ended before it ever became what he had imagined. The scholarship offers did not return. The National Football League scouts who had once watched him play eventually stopped watching. The last anyone at Cresthaven heard, he was working at his uncle's used car dealership outside Charleston, washing inventory in the mornings and answering phones later in the day. It was a quiet fall from a position he had once mistaken for permanent power. Colton Briggs transferred to a community college in another state. Landon Pike's family moved away. Pierce Dalton's name occasionally surfaced in local court records connected to smaller incidents, suggesting that consequences had not yet taught him what responsibility required. Harrison Vale sold his house several months after losing his seat on the board. The athletics wing still carried his name on a brass plaque near the entrance for a while. Eventually, the university voted to remove it. One morning, workers unscrewed the plaque from the wall. No crowd gathered. No one protested. Coach Everett Shaw retired at the end of the season. At his farewell dinner in the gymnasium, he had paced for 3 decades. Someone asked him to name the most courageous person he had ever known. "I did not hesitate. Nia Whitaker," he said. She walked into a place that did not want her, and she stayed, not because staying was easy, because she believed staying was right. The room rose in applause. Nia sat in the 3rd row. She did not stand. She gave Coach Shaw one small nod and wiped the corner of one eye with her thumb. Later, Nia returned to her apartment. Camille was out studying with friends. Real friends this time. The rooms were quiet. Nia walked into her bedroom, opened the top drawer, reached beneath the old bills, and pulled out the photograph she had hidden when she first came to town. Her younger self stared back at her from marine dress blues. 3 chevrons, crossed rifles, shoulders square, eyes steady. 4 years Nia had treated that photograph like evidence from a life she needed to put away. She carried it into the living room and placed it on the mantel, beside the folded American flag. Then she stepped back and looked at it, really looked at it. When Camille came home, she stopped in the doorway. "Mom, you put it back up?" Nia smiled. "I spent a long time trying to put that part of me away," she said, "but it turns out she's one of the reasons I'm still standing." That may be the part of Nia's story worth remembering most. Strength did not save her because it made her louder than everyone else. It saved her because it helped her stay clear when other people wanted her confused, ashamed, or afraid. She kept records when anger would have been easier. She asked for help when the first doors closed. She protected her daughter without teaching her daughter to answer cruelty with cruelty. And when Wesley finally admitted that his silence had helped the harm continue, Nia did not erase what he had done, but she recognized the courage it took to stop hiding from it. There is a difference between forgiveness and pretending nothing happened. There is also a difference between kindness and allowing people to mistreat you. Nia's story shows that a person can protect their dignity, insist on accountability, and still leave room for someone else to make a better choice. Wesley could not change the fact that he had stood in that office and said nothing. What he could change was what he did after he finally understood the cost of that silence. His apology mattered because he did not use it as a shield. He accepted consequences, told the truth, and tried to become more useful to other people than he had been in that room. Coach Shaw could not undo what his players had done. But once he saw the truth, he chose principle over a winning season. That choice cost his team something visible, but it protected something more important than a record. Camille could not control the people who excluded her. She could decide slowly and painfully that their behavior did not get to define her worth. She found her voice, joined the debate team, and helped build a system that might make the next student's experience different from her own. And Nia learned something too. For years, she had believed the strongest version of herself belonged to the past. She had hidden the photograph because she thought moving forward meant leaving that woman behind. In the end, she understood that healing does not always mean becoming someone completely new. Sometimes it means making peace with the parts of yourself that carried you through hard places. So if there is a lesson here, maybe it is this. Do not rush to judge people by how they look, where they come from, what job title they hold, or how quietly they carry themselves. You may know almost nothing about what they have survived, what they have sacrificed, or what they are capable of giving to others. When something is wrong, silence can feel safer in the moment. Sometimes it is. But when silence protects harm, it still has consequences. Courage does not always look like a dramatic speech. Sometimes it is a witness choosing to speak, a coach choosing principle over popularity, a student admitting, "I was there, I knew better, and I should have acted." Responsibility is not about being perfect. It is about being willing to face the effect of your choices without hiding behind excuses. Forgiveness, when it comes, does not cancel responsibility. Accountability does not require hatred. Both can exist in the same room. And kindness is not weakness. Kindness with boundaries is one of the strongest things a person can practice. It lets us remain human without handing our dignity to people who have not learned how to respect it. Every day gives us small chances to decide what kind of person we want to be. We can use our influence to make someone feel smaller, or we can make room. We can laugh with the crowd, or we can refuse to join in. We can protect our comfort, or we can protect someone who has been left standing alone. Those choices may seem small when they happen. They are not. They become character. They become consequences. They become the story other people remember about us. If you had been in Nia's position, walking into a place where people expected you to break, would you have stayed? Share your answer in the comments. And if this story gave you something to think about, send it to someone who might need to hear it. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more stories about courage, dignity, responsibility, and the choices that reveal who we really are. Respect is not guaranteed by status. Real respect grows from character. And sometimes the quietest person in the room is calm for a reason. They may already know exactly who they are.